Dr. Hemino Abad for the poem Taken to Heart and Given Back from Deep Within, Dr. Alice Sunkua, Dr. Bombit Largoza, Mr. Arwin Tan, and Dr. Dina Roma for sharing your memories that began in our literature classroom many years ago, even as we continue to create new ones. Today is the celebration of the vernal equinox, and on our side of the planet, our farmers are preparing to harvest the ripened grains from the fields. We are blessed thus to be in harmony with the Earth's seasonal shifts and to be aware of our own lives' tides. Brother President and Chancellor Ricky Leguda, FSC, dear colleagues, fellows, friends, and students of literature, thank you for coming this morning for this fellowship lecture and for braving the Friday traffic, and some of you coming all the way from Bohol, Leyte, Bicol, Samar, and Dipolo. To be part of this 20-year tradition of the Society of Fellows of De La Salle University, which began with a lecture of Brother Andrew Gonzalez, FSC. I chose to present today a probable memoir of a writing life in the spirit of Bienvenido N. Santos's concept, Memories Fictions, and to follow in the footsteps of Dr. Cirilo F. Bautista. 13 years ago, he presented his own memoir in a professorial chair lecture entitled The Literary Life, Notes for a Probable Confession. Mine is the retelling of a journey taken in the service of the art of poetry these past 38 years. And the story will include some poems which continue to inspire my craft, as well as a selection of the ones I have managed to compose, which mark the crucial changes in my praxis and understanding of poetry. Mainly, it will explore the manifestations of poetry's meaningful silence and how, as a practitioner of the craft of poetry, I continue to lean towards the poetics of attention, and that the masters of Jade Mountain, many of whom were Buddhists, monastics and non-monastics alike, exemplified. In the most recent gathering of university fellows with Brother Ricky Leguda, Dr. Doy Del Mundo pointed out that meaningful silence sounds congruent to his own thoughts on the Tagalog term for quiet thinking, pagmumuni-muni, a characteristic behavior of the wise. He had researched on the root of the term muni, which is from Sanskrit, and is found in the honorific name of the Buddha, Shakyamuni, the sage of his people, also known in history as Siddhartha Gautama. Indeed, the practice of writing is a process of pagmumuni-muni, a way of cultivating awareness in silence. There is a bright and tensile thread that directly connects one's gift of attention to one's way with words. Leaning into silence and moving toward words are moments in a rhythmic continuum, like the cadence of the harp, the opening and closing of petals of the red-orange hibiscus, or the stillness and flight of the blue moth. Verily, this is the vital dance of life, of yin and yang. Without one, you cannot have the other, the timeless flow of death, and life yet again. In writing and reading poems, silence is the syntax of listening, for silence is the behavior of attention. How does a poem pay attention? And to extend the metaphor, how does poetry teach us to attend to the 10,001 things of marvel in the universe and what arises from them out of our dreaming? How does the life of poetry sustain the solitude of listening? And how does sustained listening inspire the imaginative life? In the practice of writing poems, there are no fast and easy answers to these questions. There is only the constant practice to hone the skill, the way one learns how to discipline the restless mind, ceaselessly jumping like a monkey from one thing to another, and then to become quiet and focused in meditation. As Rainer Maria Rilke says to a young poet, try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday, far in the future, you will gradually, even without noticing it, live your way into the answer. The decision to devote a lifetime to learning the craft was reached in May 1976 while attending the Silliman University National Writers' Workshop, directed by Dr. Edilberto K. Tiempo and Dr. Edith L. Tiempo. I was not quite 23 years old then and had taken time off from a first job as a journalist in Tacloban City to participate in the country's premier writers' workshop for 3 whole weeks. Everything was put on hold, including family life, as there were already 2 kids to raise, Mary Ann Joseph, age 5, and Mark Anthony, 2 years old. As a young mother who had already gone through years of helping my father take care of my asthmatic mother and 3 younger brothers, had had 2 birthings, a primary postpartum hemorrhage, and ensuing clinical death experience, plus a long convalescence in the hospital battling the odds, I felt ready to learn the craft of creative writing as a beginner. Submitted to the workshop directors were 10 gnomic verses, 2 prose works which I thought were short stories, and a published critical essay. I got admitted to my first writer's workshop not on the strength of my creative work, as I later learned from Dr. Edilberto Tiempo, but on the merits of the critical reading of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's The Little Prince, using the primary and secondary reflections of Christian existentialist philosopher Gabriel Marcel as framework. It attempted an understanding of Marcel's philosophical concept of mystery, intuited by the self, when the self's attention is drawn not only to a reflection on what is in front of her, but also on that which is inside her, in the way the little prince sees his friendship with a fox and understands his responsibility for the rose that grows in his planet. Participation in the mystery of life requires, for Marcel, an existential return to concrete situations that could lead to authentic, intimate communion with the self and with others who may be included in these reflections. That college paper, written by an 18-year-old who believed it is only with the heart that one can see rightly, delighted in the power of inward seeing, of the way intuition arrives at an irrevocable and deeply personal truth. The Maytime workshop, however, was not for criticism, but for creative writing, and no one but the directors read the paper. The experience itself was catastrophic to my youthful ego, to say the least. Only one of my gnomic verses, entitled Chess, survived the critical close reading of the directors, thanks to the caring attention of Dr. Edith Tiempo on the image, syntax, and insight of the quatrain. But the 2 narrative prose works had no such luck. Dr. Edilberto Tiempo said in no uncertain terms that these were not structured as realistic short stories because I did not know how to construct conflict, how to make my characters quarrel. In fact, one of his wise advices to help me grow as a writer and as a person was to toughen up. He believed that literary writing was not for the faint-hearted, and that to endure the long-haul marathon, one had to grow a strong mind. In the wake of these early negative critical assessments, I had a glimpse of a possibility and a confident joy in what one could learn as a reader, how language moved the human heart. I knew I needed to write, but I believed that if I had courage, I might learn how to write poems well. It was a brightening glance into a desirable future. Why did I choose poetry? Maybe it is because of that one gnomic poem that initially succeeded. Maybe it was the note in reference to that small success that Dr. Edith Tiempo wrote in my tattered manuscript like a peripheral tangential challenge, and I quote her, "One swallow does not a summer make," unquote. I wanted to learn how to write poems because I was hooked to the beauty I found in poetry and because the making of poems was a difficult craft to master. Didn't Rilke say to the young poet to trust in the difficult because it was the only teacher? And I reckon if I'd accept Dr. Edilberto Tiempo's offer of a graduate fellowship to pursue my master's degree in Silliman University, I would be learning the sullen art from two of the best writing teachers anyone could dream of having in the Philippines. What a blessing it would be to sit at the feet of the masters, even if it would mean forfeiting a job with a regular salary and living on the 300 peso monthly stipend and vegetable siopaw from Rocinante. On the first week, after the workshop day's intense session where my verses were reduced to rubble, the fellows visited the university bookstore. Francis Butch Macansantos took from a small shelf a small double-day anchor pocketbook, The Jade Mountain, 300 poems of the Tang Dynasty, and told me to buy it. The poems were translated into English by Bene from the text of Kiang Kang Hu. Macansantos said that these would teach me the basic techniques of poetry. This anthology has been with me through all these years as a reminder of that moment of recognition when I understood the difference between being a reader and a reader who writes. Macansantos didn't tell me then, but I later learned in the poetry seminar taught by Dr. Edith Tiempo that the early modernists in Europe, particularly the Imagists led by Ezra Pound, were influenced by the art of the Tang and the Edo periods. The Imagist Manifesto of 1912 laid out three aesthetic principles for the movement. One, direct treatment of the thing, whether subjective or objective. Two, using absolutely no word that does not contribute to the presentation. And three, composing in the sequence of the musical phrase, not in the sequence of the metronome. Ezra Pound's 1913 poem, In a Station of the Metro, defined the tenor of Imagism. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. One of the poems in Jade Mountain from the 8th century by Li Duan, called On Hearing Her Play the Harp, became an introductory text in all my literature classes whenever we tackled poetry. It served to quicken the students' senses, including their appetite for research into historical, contextual information, and to awaken their minds to the experience of sensual and intellectual pleasures. And I think many of them can memorize the poem with me, so you can recite it with me. On hearing her play the harp, her hands of white jade by a window of snow are glimmering on a golden fretted harp, and to catch the quick eye of Chow Yu, she touches a wrong note now and then. Another poem by Chang Chien called A Buddhist Retreat Behind Broken Mountain Temple became a personal sanctuary of a poem and remains a spiritual refuge to this day. In the pure morning, near the old temple, where early sunlight points the treetops, my path has wound through a sheltered hollow of boughs and flowers to a Buddhist retreat. Here, birds are alive with mountain light, and 1,000 sounds are quieted by the breathing of a temple bell. I did not leave Dumaguete unchanged. 5 months later, I heeded the call to come back, to follow the path with heart. And I took leave from work and my family again and accepted a graduate fellowship in Silliman University and began my real literary education, voraciously reading to address the serious gaps in my knowledge of English, American, and Philippine literature for my classes under the Tiempos. I had to cover the basic ground of over 200 books, which were in the undergraduate and graduate reading lists for the comprehensive examinations. I had to catch up and be at par with Grace Montederamos and Fanny Heidi Liego, the brightest of my classmates who were in the undergraduate English majors program, and to be within the intellectual ambit of my postgraduate classmate Anthony Tan. On my own, I continued to read Asian literature and its cognate fields in religion and philosophy in Hibbard Hall, and I reveled in its treasure trove of wisdom literature, particularly the Vedas, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Tao Te Ching, the I Ching, and the Chan or Zen Buddhist poems of China and Japan. This chosen immersion in Asian literature expanded when I read for the graduate course on Chinese literature under Professor Albert Furrow, who had been a missionary in China and knew Mandarin. For our class, he put an exhibit in End House, his music studio residence on campus, the Chinese paintings on silk scrolls that he brought with him on his dangerous escape to Japan during the Cultural Revolution. He played for us on the old harpsichord the folk poems that we were studying from the Book of Songs or the Shujing, and graciously served us tea whenever we had poetry readings. The Japanese haiku masters Matsuo Basho and Kobayashi Isa illumined for me important aspects of craft, particularly the technique of verbal economy, or compactness, in showing the thingness of things, their claritas and quiditas. Here, for instance, is Basho's serene celebration of spring. Under cherry trees, soup, salad, fish and all, seasoned with petals. And here is Isa's poem on the death of his child. Dew evaporates, and all our world is dew. So dear, so fresh, so fleeting. The felt thoughts in these poems move with the aesthetic energy of Mono no Aware, the empathy toward the transience and ephemeral nature of things. These poems also exemplify the aesthetic principle reiterated in our graduate creative writing classes and workshops: show, don't tell. A decade later, in 1989, when I was composing a haiku-inspired poem, Origami, I strove to hew closely to my models of empathy's austere language and precise imagistic suggestiveness. This word unfolds, gathers up wind to speed the crane's flight north of my sun to you. I am shaping this poem out of paper, folding distances between our seasons. This poem is a crane. When its wings unfold, the paper will be pure and empty. A presentiment for Asian philosophy and religion also made me practice the spiritual discipline of ideation or meditation. In the late 70s, the Ananda Marga taught Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga that drew many artists, including Dr. Edith Tiempo. And because she invited me to meditate with her, I took to sitting in half lotus position beside her by the carp and water lily pond in her garden. When she left in 1977 to receive in Hong Kong the Elizabeth Lewis Moore Distinguished Asian Professor Award and serve as a visiting professor in the Hong Kong Baptist University, her absence prompted the composition of a poem, Jade Mountain Peak, the first serious attempt since the 1976 workshop. I have reached Jade Mountain Peak, but the thatched cottage is empty. Under the blossoming rain trees, the beaten grass path tells. The master's familiar footfall is seeking another secret trail. Quietly by the pond I wait and listen to the wind song, a stringless lute whispering the long day away into evening. Inside, I light the lamp and cook a simple meal. Tonight, Jade Mountain is teaching me the lesson of meaningful silence. And what a fateful night it turned out to be. When she came back to Dumaguete City after a long semester, I mustered the courage to let her read the poem, the first after my dismal failures in the workshop. She kept the poem with her for about a week and then told me that I should think of sending some of my work to Kirima Polotan of Focus Philippines for possible publication, assuring that she would put in a good word for me. Her encouragement made me reread the poem closely to retrace and understand the workings of the poem's language that she, as the most discriminating reader, had kindly and generously appreciated. The process of composing a poem is largely an unconscious play with words, which, if one is lucky, gives room for the poem's mind to find itself and discover new worlds. After the poem's crafting is done, the writer just becomes another reader of the completed work. As a reader then, I wondered how Jade Mountain's lesson of meaningful silence was delivered in the poem. It seemed to me that the desire to express the experience of being bereft found a way of coming across through the poem's reticence about such feelings. The persona comes home to her senses and is present to what is, not to what is not. There is no need to indulge the loss. One of the aesthetic principles Dr. Edith Tiempo taught was the intrinsic restraint and evocative approach of poetry's language, its appetite for suggestive images rather than for mere generic descriptions or flabby statements. The meditative tone is the poem's means of evoking the persona's sense of loss as well as surrender to what suffices. I had read the lines aloud to myself again and again to hear the pitch and heft of the lines and to shape the music. I use this procedure until now as an important contemplative exercise in revision in order to listen closely to the particularizing sounds of the poem's language, its rhythm of song, as Ellen Bryant Voigt calls it, as well as its syntax, its rhythm of thought. The poem's compositional undertow was the challenge of rendering through the music of words the presence in the absence, a difficult principle that John Keats showed in his Ode on a Grecian Urn. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, ye soft pipes play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared, pipe to the spirit, ditties of no tone. Criticism refers to this Keatsian technique as negative capability, or, and I quote, the ability to contemplate the world without the desire to try and reconcile contradictory aspects or fit it into close and rational systems, unquote. John Keats himself defined it when he wrote of the greatness of Shakespeare, and I quote him again. At once it struck me what quality went to form a man of achievement, especially in literature, and which Shakespeare possessed so enormously. I mean, negative capability, that is, when man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason, unquote. For Keats, negative capability was the mark of supreme empathy with other forms of being. This was clearly too high a mark for my talent and efforts, but when one is young, one can be reckless in the wilderness of the untried. I attended the UP Writers Workshop where I first met Dr. Isagani Cruz, Nick Joaquin, Greg Brillantes, Bienvenido Lumbera, NVM Gonzalez, Estrella Alfon, and Franz Arceliana in the summer of 1978. In one of the after-workshop sessions, which are actually more exciting, I dared to ask teaching poet Ricardo de Ungria to critically read my poems, and de Ungria chose to discuss Jade Mountain Peak. He intoned the lines in his characteristic style. The wind song, a stringless lute whispering, the long day fly away into evening. And he said that the poem's sounds configure the tensions which become most intense where the language is most quiet and comes to complete silence in the last end-stop line of the second stanza. I listened to this way of reading of the poem on the micro level of sound, the phonemes overhearing each other as part of a larger musical composition. This procedure of reading made me hear that considerable silence marked by the stanza break between the second and third stanzas. This gap can be read, as in music, equivalent to a full rest, an achieved silence, where a resonance may dwell in the inner ear. Dr. Gilberto Tiempo's discussion of the critic Benedetto Croce had focused on the reader's task of dreaming the poet's dream. I finally understood how keen attention enables a reader to dream the poem's dream, imagining what the poem does not need to say, since the poem has become a gesture of language. It took close to a year after the 1978 workshop in UP to work up the courage to send Jade Mountain Peak with a sheaf of other early poems to the formidable Kirima Polotan, and to finally get some of these published in Focus Philippines. I began writing as a campus journalist and a budding poet in the late 60s and early 70s, and I had the great fortune of encountering in my path in college two sages, Corazon Logarta in philosophy and Merly Alunan in literature. They enraptured my ear with beautiful words in their lectures because they themselves found inspiration in words well wrought by poets and philosophers. Alunan, who had been Edith Tiempo's graduate student, recognized my nascent passion for beautiful language and taught me how to read literature with an attentive eye. Until now, reading holds greater pleasure than writing itself. When one pursues this journey called the writing life, more often than not, one takes bearings on an active and exciting reading life. Literature students with interview class projects inevitably ask writers how one could become a writer. And my answer is always, read, read, and read some more. And when they ask me the question, when did you start writing? The trickster in me, who loves to keep students' consciousness agile, replies by bringing the question away from its literal concerns to its origins in the imagination. Once upon a time, in a grade 1 classroom, a child listened to her teacher read the story of two abandoned children called Hansel and Gretel. And the listening child remained disconsolate even after the part in the story where the evil witch was finally pushed into the oven. Becoming disconsolate may have been the earliest initiation to the way reading and listening carefully to a story could bring the imagination to a place where nothing is ever what it appeared to be. One did not know it then, but on hindsight, it seems that the power of reading literature was already opening up an interest in the promptings of the human heart and mind, particularly our capacity to choose between kindness and cruelty. Under Alunan's foundational tutelage, reading was not for the overall generalized patterns of meaning, but for the complex particulars that resisted any carelessness of the eye. This was also a period of curing a kind of reading blindness, deprogramming habits reiterated by teachers who unwittingly encouraged superficial reading through mere comprehension of the theme, which brought to simplistic abstractions the irreducible beauty and gravity of a literary work. As a literature teacher later, I named this blindness as the use of the reader's ordinary eye, exemplified by slipshod reading. Readers who are blinded by their second-hand, mostly unexamined, generic preconceptions of reality like to rest easy and are satisfied with big but blurry, universalizing generalizations of life. They miss the specific point as well as the pleasure of the particulars of a literary work. Reading with sustained attention was an introduction to the extraordinary way of seeing which all serious artists cultivate in their craft. Artists desire to devour, digest, and world a sentient universe that they recreate in the imagination and communicate to the self and to others through the language of the arts. What is common, ordinary, routine, mundane, ignites with rages, and the imagination delights in sensing something imbued with magic. And its concomitant action is the naming of that which gives delight. The world artists absorb transforms them, even as they transform their world through art. A paradigmatic story of this transformative absorption is Jorge Luis Borges' act of scooping a handful of sand when he stood in awe for the first time before the pyramids of Giza in the Valley of Kings. When he opened his hands to release the grains through his fingers, he said, "Now I've modified the Sahara." Even in the midst of a broken world, things which are seemingly ugly, chaotic, despicable, destructive, or hopeless can be absorbed and transformed by the artist who seeks a way, no matter how raw and fragmentary, of restoring some sense of the primary order of beauty by partaking of real things as if for the first time. Terry Tempest Williams, in her book, Finding Beauty in a Broken World, uses the art of the mosaic as the artist's conversation between what is broken, and I quote, "Outside, inside, above ground, and below, there is a way of being in the world that calls us beyond hope. Mosaic is not simply an art form, but a form of integration, a way of not only seeing the world, but responding to it," unquote. One such man who knew how to respond rightly to his world was Florentino. He crafted fine furniture with his hands and taught other people how to do it. For him, partaking of the mystery of trees led him deeper into himself. When he planted tugas, nara, and mahogany trees in the mountains of Maribohok, or when he worked with wood to shape it into a child's crib, a mother's rocking chair, or a daughter's four-poster bed, his hands knew the joy of caressing that mystery. I used to watch him at work in his shop in the open space under our house in Amlot Street, Tagbilaran City. Most of the time, my father was silent. But because I asked, he named for me the tools and materials that inhabited his workshop: martilyo, lansang, sapilya, gabas, eskwala, panunton, limbas, barina, tigib, suelas. Each of these had a particular function in woodworking. And as a master craftsman, he handled his tools efficiently, hardly wasting any material or energy in doing the work and getting it done well. Dr. Edith Tiempo taught the invaluable lesson of living a life of mindful seeing, or of developing a consciousness open and sensitive to the full presences of things in themselves. A story many of us love to tell because we somehow share memories of her gentle way of teaching as a way of being. It's about how she would stop all of a sudden in the middle of her lecture and point to something magical that she was seeing. I experienced Edith Tiempo's seizing the teaching moment at least twice. The first in our class on religious themes in literature, and the second with Susan Lara. During the summer, her son Lev went with us to Dumaguete to watch the dolphins in the wilds of Tanyan Strait. The course on religious themes in literature was tough, with readings from selected books of the Holy Bible, as well as modern masterpieces like T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. One day, we were studying the technique of synesthesia, of compressing the power of two or more senses to make language new, in the symbolist prose poem, The White Water Lily by Stefan Mallarmé. We learned from research that the concept of the artist, the poet, as musicien du silence, is ascribed to Mallarmé, but we found it difficult to discern the silence in the prose poem. sum up with a glance the virginal absence dispersed in this solitude, and as one gathers, in memory of a sight, one of those magical closed water lilies which spring up suddenly, enveloping nothingness with their hollow whiteness, formed from untouched dreams, from a happiness that will never take place, and from the breath that I am now holding in fear of an apparition, depart with it, steal silently away, rowing little by little. Edith Tiempo suddenly stopped speaking and said, "Look, there's a leaf falling," pointing to the mango tree behind us. Those of us who turned our heads right away to look saw the beam of light and the leaf slowly descending to the ground like no other leaf we had ever seen. We didn't only understand how the poetic technique of synesthesia moves in a stereophonic way, we also knew with our bodies the music of silence and how things of the world become vivid in the space of our undivided attention. Such vivacity is the radiant energy that ignites the imagination into true seeing. One of the poems that came out of this period of apprenticeship was a long poem structured in the manner of a three-part symphony. I was reading Hollerlin's poems and Rilke's Duino elegies after falling in love with his sonnets to Orpheus, which murmured their music into my ears even in my dreams. It was also Rilke's concept of lived poetry that inspired the focus of the critical exegesis for my creative master's thesis, Poetry as Blood and Gesture. I submitted to Edith Tiempo the poem Anima Sola, One Who Flies Alone, and she said it is an ars poetica, a meditation on the stages of apprenticeship, from learning the basics through imitation to becoming an adept on the solitary flight of discovery and invention. I will read to you only the third part, the flight. No more is it a question of defying gravity, but of skies waiting. Self-spread between wingtip to wingtip, the beak perfectly aligned with its aim. We probe the heavens for dust particles, debris of ancient explanations, for this longing to explore worlds and know them, as self is by name known. We can never foretell what it is that waits. We are divers, respecting our fear for the vast and deep, yet knowing back of this fear is our own daring for coral kingdoms outspread and glowing, or sirens chanting secrets between the reeds. But again, we may find a white nothingness only, and our eagle eyes go blind with knowing such fatal purity. Perhaps we shall fall upon the void of black stars, and we shall feel them when we lose all sense of being, and this precious luminosity of wings is swallowed in a quiet singing. 10 years, from 1976 to 1986, was the period suggested by Dr. Edith Tiempo for writing and revising the poems and getting them ready for publication in the first collection. As an obedient student, I followed her instruction to the letter, literally, since, after all, ripening is all. Dreamweavers was the last poem composed in 1986 for the first book, published in 1987. By then, I had come to Manila in the dangerous years of the assassination of Benigno Aquino and the last years of the Marcos dictatorship. I had become a probationary teacher in LaSalle, thanks to Dr. Isagani Cruz, the chair of the then English Language and Literature Department. Had marched in EDSA and Mendiola during the People Power Revolution, and had become active in the feminist movement in the Philippines with female artists who constituted Kalayaan, Kasibulan, Forward-Looking Women, and Women's Feature Service. Dreamweavers marked a departure from the ways with language of the earlier poems. We are entitled to our own definitions of the worlds we have in common. Earth, house, stay. Water, well, carry. Fire, stove, ten. Air, song, sigh. Either, dream, die. And try out new combinations with keywords unlocking power. House on fire, sing. Stove underwater, stay. Earth filled well, die. The spells and spellings of our vocabularies are oracular in translation. One woman in Paglitoan, another in Solentinamen, still another in Harksheim, and many other women, naming half the world together, can move their earth, must house their fire, be water to their song, will their dreams well. This poem has been called a feminist manifesto. In the cartography of my imagination, it is El Puerto del Porvenir, from where the first collection, my book of origin, sailed further into the yet unknown and still unlived second collection, The Future Ochre Tones, Poems in English and Cebuano, my book of changes. The second collection began with a draft of the poem Ochre Tones, which I asked Bienvenido N. Santos to read when he was visiting and staying with the Brothers community. After reading the draft, he very kindly said he could see the image of the newly hatched house lizard and could hear the affirmative sound of the gecko. But he surprised me when he asked how the gecko sounds to Visayan ears. I mimicked its onomatopoeic name, tuku. After a writing residency in Hawthornden Castle in Midlothian, Scotland, I told him that I had decided to go back to the tradition of the Cebuano balak and would start by reading the tradition recovered in the research of Dr. Resil Mojares and published by the Cebuano Studies Center of the University of San Carlos. My resolve to relearn the literature written in my mother tongue became stronger after I attended as panelist the Cornelio Faigao Writers' Workshop in Bolhoon, Cebu. Thus began my tentative toddler's steps in writing in Cebuano. The indirect and roundabout route was through translation and a dissertation on cultural translation, or what I called in my theoretical formulation, transcreation. 12 years after Dreamweavers, the second book was published in the 2 languages I could now move in. I hope to reinstate in my Cebuano transcreation of the poems the sounds of my mother tongue, its peculiar tones and textures. Ochre tones became tando huni, where the tuku sounds its trochees at the poem's closure. And for the Cebuanos here, this is a treat. Ngani karon, nagsingsing ug mutyaong yamog ang tumoy sa mga dahon sa kawayan. Gihandom ko si Gracia, diha sa huyuhoy sa hangin. Samtang usa ka tuko naghuni sa iyang tando, tando, tando. How does inspiration work, and where does it spring from? In the poetry techniques courses I taught in the Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program, the book, The Western Wind, An Introduction to Poetry by John Frederick Nims, was the anthology of choice for the graduate students, majority of them writing in the English language. The final 14th chapter on inspiration and effort served as a helpful reference point for those who wanted to know more about the workings of inspiration and how they could tap into its mysterious power. Nims says, and I quote, "Our inspirations are as specialized as our minds are. Inspirations follow common sense rules. We get only the inspirations we are qualified to receive. And unless we have laid the groundwork by conscious planning and hard work, there is no inspiration to be hoped for," unquote. Louis Pasteur also says that chance favors the prepared mind. The prepared mind is always active and actively seeking a way of discovering and knowing how to make something out of inspiration. More than a year ago, in the process of advising my last MFA mentee, Ned Parfan, who was then completing the critical exegesis of his poetry collection called The Murmur Asylum for the graduate thesis. And by the way, his first book will soon be released by the UP Press. I read the book that he lent me called The Art of Attention, A Poet's Eye by Donald Revell. Revell says, and I quote, "In the attentive occasion that is truth in poetry, what you see is what you get. Oh, taste and see," unquote. For him and for Denise Levertov, from whom Oh, Taste and See comes from, the practice of the craft, the sustained seeing in poems, seems to make of what is seen, and I quote him again, entireties undisfigured by intent and upheld by perfect attendance. This plain attention in poems, that piety and unaggressive articulation of attention, could be a form of prayer, an instance of worship, a forwarding of peace. I believe this is now how I understand my poetics. From my first collection, Dream Weavers, to the new work, Fishes of Light, Peces de Luz, with Cuban poet Alex Fleitas, I continue to be fascinated by the tension between finding a way of saying what needs to be said and finding spaces in the work where silence must be kept. Crafting a poem for me is exploring a musical configuration, and my main instrument is the human voice, or the voices I hear, and its or their capacity for aural inflections, and finely calibrated tones to render the textures of a complex human experience. A poem's heart cares for and attends to its own mind, and strives to sing the old stories in the face of the pressures wrought in the worlds we live in, at this particular time, in this particular space. What W.B. Yeats said in The Second Coming, that things fall apart, the center cannot hold, predicted a postmodern problem that I now experience, like you, on a daily basis in the Philippines. The poems I write are spaces of making momentary sense of the senselessness I have to live with and endure. They are tentative processes towards imagining some answers, or even more questions, in what is an evolving and continually changing and transient inner environment. Lauren Isley, one of the naturalists whose books I love, along with the works of Terry Tempest Williams, Barry Lopez, Diane Ackerman, Annie Dillard, and Wendell Berry, speaks with wisdom in relation to our inner and outer environments. He said that each lifetime is a long, lonely journey. And I quote, "The journey is difficult, immense. We will travel as far as we can, but we cannot, in one lifetime, see all that we would like to see, or to learn all that we hunger to know." Unquote. How does one feed the hunger to travel beyond what one knows? And what is the price one pays for choosing to nurture the writing life, for loving the muse of literature? The quest of the writer reminds me of a wonderful rubai by Persian Islamic mystic poet Jalaluddin Rumi. "I would love to kiss you. The price of kissing is your life. Now my loving is running toward my life, saying, 'What a bargain, let's buy it.' The price of kissing, embracing, loving the writing life is life itself. And like the lover in Rumi's poem, one must be able to ecstatically celebrate one's constant yes to the demands of such life. It will not always be easy to celebrate one's yes, because there are forces which will continually tear the writer apart and away from the joy of the choice. Nobel laureate for literature, Wisława Szymborska of Poland, asked in a poem called The Joy of Writing, "Is there then a world where I rule absolutely on fate? A time I bind with chains of signs, and existence become endless at my bidding? The joy of writing, the power of preserving, revenge of a mortal hand." In the final reckoning, poets experience the joy of writing on moving water, Margaret Atwood calls this the writer's way of negotiating with the dead. And she says, all writers learn from the dead. As long as you continue to write, you continue to explore the work of writers who have preceded you. You also feel judged and held to account by them. Unquote. Gaston Bachelard has a meditation, a book called Water and Dreams, on the imagination of water, of matter, and he exhorts this way, the poets this way. Come, O my friends, on a clear morning to sing the stream's vowels. Where is our first suffering? It was born in the hours when we have hoarded within us things left unsaid. Even so, the stream will teach you to speak. In spite of the pain and the memories, it will teach you energy through poems. Not a moment will pass without repeating some lovely round word that rolls over the stones. Perhaps I can now mark a new threshold of understanding how to listen to the round words falling over the stones on the streambed. I lean ever more intently into the nothingness to pay attention to the 10,001 things, one marvel at a time, in acceptance, in rapture, moving toward temporary order that poems create in the silent field of time. A year ago, in my home island, Bohol, a poem which I now call Earthrise made its annunciation. Not yet lost, but rising, as corona of sun lifts above blue marble of earth, seen from the hatch, sailing round and round the days and nights of exile. Here, in the body's ground of breath, this now, jasmine blossoms sing the moon's resurrection. Bring each thing back into the heart, old garden tended to and mended over, refusing banishment of beauty or truth. For truth be told, without blinking an eye, nor flinching a muscle, goodness doesn't last, and can be sequestered, sold for less than 30 pieces of gold. It's the only thing cannot be embellished with parakeets or prophets. Look into my eye. Behold, death is rising, radiant from the low. What is it that remains constant in the act of writing poems in the context of inevitable change and in the face of human mortality? Russian-American poet Ilya Kaminsky, addressing an inscrutable God in the poem Author's Prayer, seems to suggest that only the poet's desire to praise remains steadfast. I will praise your madness, and in a language not mine, speak of music that wakes us, music in which we move. For whatever I say is a kind of petition, and the darkest days must I praise. Let me end with a poem also written in Bohol before the October 15, 2013 earthquake, while on a self-imposed solitary writing retreat in the lovely old house lent by writer friend Ino Manalo. The house, like the heritage church, has been destroyed. But when the poem is read, sometimes, when one is quiet enough, it awakens the world that it once was, and something rises from the ruins like a phoenix of the imagination, vibrant and complete. In Baclayon, reading Levertov's For Those Whom the Gods Love Less. Perhaps it is now the other way around, and I have become an almost perfect lover, caring little that the gods love poets less. I have begun again anew, listening from the old window, from the open window to the old tambis tree, drop red bells of fruit onto the grass and roof. In this humid May afternoon in Baclayon, the guava, redolent on the branch, meets the sun bird's praise. both scent and song passing through me, as though I have turned into all-embracing air in this keep of grace. Levertops, radiant wings, decanting shadows, urging the only way to let love. Thank you very much for listening.